I always admired Bill Drake's programming expertise and tried to emulate the KHJ programming elements wherever I was. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I left Clear Channel to jump over to K-Earth.
Welcome once again to the Talking Archive. My name is Josh Jacobs, and it's an honor to be speaking with someone who, the radio station, Coast 103.5. He programmed it for over 20 years, and I'm talking about the legendary Jhani Kaye. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, so what a pleasure to be with you today, Josh. Thank you.
Well, tell us about your life growing up and what inspired you to become a radio personality as well as a program director.
Oh, well, I grew up in a Southern California town about 100 miles outside of L.A. called Hemet, and I was 16 years old, and there was a local AM radio station that had 15 minutes every Sunday morning to basically read the lunch menus and other high school news. And a girl was the host of that. One weekend, she couldn't perform and get to the radio station. She happened to call me, not because we knew each other, but I was in theater at the time, and she figured I was as good a candidate as any. And she said, go to mine. I've got things written down. You'll go to the radio station. There'll be an engineer there, and just read what I have, and he'll do all the technical operation for you. Well, I go to her locker. I go out to the radio station, and she's only prepared 5 minutes for a 15-minute program. So it was, I remember driving away in my little Corvair and looking in the rearview mirror, seeing the three towers of the radio station in the field behind the studios, and thinking to myself, I never want to do that again. Well, eventually she just gave the program to me. It was fun to do. But one day, the general manager of the radio station, who I had never met, did some research and found out who I was, and they offered me a job. I had been hanging around the radio station and getting the afternoon and late night disc jockey hamburgers and answering his request lines, that kind of thing. So I kind of fell into it. But at the age of 16 or 17, I was employed in commercial radio.
And that radio station was KHSJ.
That's it. It stood for Hemet, San Jacinto, which are the two cities that reside in a valley out in the Inland Empire.
Wow. And what was the frequency of that station?
1320 AM, 105.5 FM.
Oh, goodness. Wow. So it was a simulcast. But how many were even listening to the FM? Because FM was not king at the time. It was kind of an afterthought. Or I guess it was kind of coming up around the time you got into radio.
Actually, AM was still king when I first got in. And in order to operate a radio station that had an AM radio station that had more than one tower, which describes most radio stations in the United States, you had to have what is known as a first-class radio telephone operator's license. And I had received a scholarship from a Jewish organization out in Hemet, and that, along with my father's own assistance, I got to go to the William B. Ogden Radio Operational Engineering School in Huntington Beach, California, which is the same school one of my disc jockeys from K-Earth went to, Shotgun Tom Kelly. That gave you the license which allowed you to operate and take the transmitter readings of an AM station with more than one tower. It was like gold in the industry, and I was very lucky. Yeah, you wanted to be on the AM side of things because that's where all the listeners were, not necessarily on the FM.
Yeah, and in addition to being on the air, what other assignments were you given in a small market like that station?
Oh, well, you kind of did everything. I mean, I literally would have to walk out at the bottom of each tower's what they call the doghouse. It's an electrical box that you open and take readings. Most people don't want to do that because they're black widows and you're out in the field. But I had to do that. I even had to water the lawn in front of the radio station during records because we were a small operation. That's what you do in small market radio.
And who are some of your idols growing up? Now, you said you used to listen to KHSJ before you were on the station. Who are some of your favorite DJs on that radio station, or even locally here in Southern California? I'm not sure if the signal was able to reach Hemet like KHJ or KRLA.
Yeah, KHSJ went on the air, I think in 1959. I was in fifth grade or so, and it was a big deal for our little community. And they had one announcer who was named Jack Sands. Jack is the one who taught me how to operate a board and how to announce and do everything with the technical operation of a radio station. So he was very important in my career. And so was the general manager, one of the nicest guys in the world, Larry Shields. And I got to work across from Larry Shields later in my career. When I went to San Bernardino, I was on the big AM station there, KFXM, and we also owned KDO-FM. And Larry was on the FM, and I was on the AM, and that was a real thrill to work with him again. In terms of L.A. radio talent, I was really focused on one announcer in particular, and that was the real Don Steele.
Oh, yeah. How many times did you get to meet the real Don Steele?
In my entire career, which spans over 4 decades, never.
Wow.
And it's something that's really missing in my history. Now, I was personal friends with his wife after Don had passed, and we would celebrate the real Don Steele's birthday on April Fools, because that's when he was born. Mm-hmm. We would get together, and just a couple of years ago, Sean, his wife, passed away as well.
Sean was the person who gave me my first paying gig in radio, and I never met Don either. I was interning for Oldies 93 KCBS FM, and Don had just left to go to KRF 101. He got an offer he couldn't refuse. And Sean, the year before, had come from KRF to Oldies 93, so they kind of were there for a while together, but then he switched to the station she had been at before.
I would have given anything to meet Don. When you're a young disc jockey in this industry, you emulate different people, and he's the one I tried to emulate the most. Of course, there was no imitation or emulation of the real Don Steele. He was a unique talent and had his own particular presentation.
He did, and he was one of my idols too. And having Shotgun Tom Kelly take over KEarth after Don passed away was just, I think that was the perfect choice. I mean, like you said, nobody ever replaces Don, but man, Shotgun was great.
I always admired Bill Drake's programming philosophies and tried to emulate the KHJ programming elements wherever I was. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I left Clear Channel to jump over to KEarth, because I wanted to work at one of the radio stations that had Bill Drake's influence. And KEarth 101 was the perfect station for my particular time in history. So it was a real honor to walk into the station and reinstall some of the Drakeisms that had been lost over the years.
It was interesting you mention that, because I remember when I read that you were going to become the new PD for KEarth 101, and I decided to listen at the beginning of the year because I knew that's when you were going to be taking over. I thought, how soon will the station be transformed into something even greater? And almost right away, you brought back that top of the hour timpani roll, like Bill Drake had it back in the 60s. Even KEarth had that until they had that cheesy synthesized version, and it went back to KRTH Los Angeles instead of KEarth 101 Los Angeles. And then the first songs I heard were I Hear You Knockin' by Dave Edmonds, which I had not heard for years on KEarth or anywhere else, followed by If You Leave Me Now by Chicago. I was like, okay, there's been a change here at KEarth. And he expanded the music. I'm just going to keep on bragging right now, but it was great. I mean, I was like, wow, this station really has just changed overnight.
Well, a lot of people in the industry, in particular the people over at KEarth, were afraid that I was going to coasterize, that's K-O-S-T, coasterize KEarth and ruin it and modify its DNA. I knew of the heritage of KEarth. You don't mess with that. It was known as an oldies radio station, although we didn't use the term oldies. It had a personality that you did not want to vary from. in particular, some of the staff members of K-Earth were afraid I was going to coasterize their radio station. Well, I was smart enough to realize that there's a DNA that's very specific to K-Earth, and you don't mess with that. You can dress it up a little differently, but the core has to remain true to the formula. So when I came in, or before I came in, I was listening to the radio station. They had been integrating the 70s with the 60s product that they were famous for. And I realized that what was happening was, if you listen one quarter hour, it could be 70s heavy. And if you listen another quarter hour, it could be 60s heavy. And quite simply, I walked in, and besides cleaning up the announcers a bit and putting in some Bill Drake formatics, I made sure that it was 60s, 70s, 60s. So you were only one song away from the decade you loved the most if you were a K-Earth listener.
Wow. The thing is that what a lot of people forget, because it's easy to forget, over the years, you were a rock and roll DJ, at first at Tiger Radio. You got to work with Bruce Chandler, who was also on K-Earth 101 back in the day.
You bet.
And did you hire Bruce at K-Earth, by the way?
Bruce was already in place. I inherited him when I came into the radio station.
Oh, cool. Who are some of the DJs that you hired at K-Earth 101? Because I remember you moved some pieces around and put Gary Bryan back in Morning Drive, where he is to this day, and you put Shotgun back in Afternoon Drive.
Well, I had known Shotgun from my Coast 103 days. He came over and visited our radio station on Ardmore at one time. And it's hard not to like Shotgun. Everyone who meets him finds a friendly fellow. But when I listened to the station, I realized that they had Shotgun at night, and he didn't belong there. He belonged in Afternoon Drive. And Gary had been in mornings before I got there, and they had placed him in Afternoon Drive instead of Shotgun. So everyone was kind of moved around. Now, Hollywood Hamilton had replaced Gary Bryan in Morning Drive. Hollywood really loves New York, and he wanted to get there. And through a lot of negotiation, we finally made that happen for him. But I looked at my budget, and I realized that Gary Bryan was still getting a morning man salary to do Afternoon Drive. What a waste, because all he was doing was intros and outros at that point. So I took Gary Bryan across the street to Marie Callender's restaurant, and we had lunch, and I said, I'm going to do you one of the greatest favors in your career. And he goes, what's that? I said, it comes with a condition. And Gary said, well, what's that? And I said, that if I ask you to do something, I want you to do it. You can disagree with it, and we can discuss it, but you will do it my way. And he said, well, what do you plan to do? I said, I'm going to return you to Morning Drive, something that no one else would do. And in fact, the management of K-Earth at the time were not up to Gary returning to mornings. I had to push this feat all the way to the owners in New York to make this happen, but it happened. So I got Gary back where he belonged. I got Shotgun back in Afternoon Drive where he belonged. And it was like a puzzle. The pieces fit now. Nothing was displaced or sounded weird. Shotgun has a presentation for Afternoon Drive. Gary has wonderful conversational comments and stories to share in Morning Drive. So it's all worked out very well. Gary's still there and is killing the ratings in Los Angeles radio to this day.
Yeah, he's been there for 22 years now. I got to meet him about 10 years ago at Pink's Hot Dogs. Really, really friendly. I got to take a picture with him, and he said to my best friend, Andre, you should be in radio. He didn't say it to me.
Well, I don't want to take anything away from Lisa Stanley, who is his other half, his radio other half in the mornings, because Lisa and Gary work beautifully. Before I got there, apparently there was some chemistry issues, or I don't know what was going on, but they had sanctioned Lisa to a separate studio where she couldn't have any eye contact with Gary. They couldn't play off each other, and it was just so strange. So, I have a programming guide I used to provide all of my air talent.
We are talking with Jhani Kaye, and next time we'll find out what is in that programming guide, as well as how he got his first job as a program director.